The glade shimmered under the pale light of 3 moons, their glow filtering through twisted branches and silken leaves that swayed even though there was no wind. The air hummed with the slow breath of the forest, but near the stone-ringed pond, it held something sharper frustration, thick and bitter. Aelira stood with her back turned, her arms crossed tightly, wings twitching with residual rage. Fireflies kept their distance. Thornick emerged from the ferns like a drifting puff of spores, his body glowing faintly violet, his head crowned in the wide cap of a sage mushroom. He waddled closer, careful not to snap any roots beneath his stubby feet. His voice came like warm steam rising from damp moss. "Troubled night, mother of tempests?" Aelira exhaled slowly, not turning. "Don't call me that." "My apologies. Shall I try her storminess? Or perhaps Chaos Seed's keeper?" Her shoulders tensed. She spun around, eyes flashing like glass struck by moonlight. "Not tonight, Thornick." He tilted his head, spores puffing from beneath his chin in slow amusement. "Did she burn the root cellar again?" "No." "Melt the pond?" "No." "Grow another carnivorous mushroom in your bath basin?" Aelira's jaw clenched. "No. She asked if her father had wings." Then slammed the door and vanished into the shadows. Thornick blinked. "Ah, wings. That old question." Aelira turned away again. "I told her not to ask." "I told her it doesn't matter." "Clearly it does. She's 16. Everything matters too much." Thornick's steps were slow, deliberate. He stopped beside her and sat on a mossy stone, his glow dimming out of respect. "And you never told her?" Aelira's silence held weight, like the moment before thunder. The trees nearby quieted. "We don't deal with humans," she said finally. Thornick's eyebrows rose. "Oh, that again." "Not again. Ever." "Come now, you made a deal once." Her eyes flicked toward him. "I made a mistake once." He tilted his cap. "Then why do your eyes soften every time she laughs? Why does your tone crack?" "When she runs too fast and trips?" Aelira didn't answer. A wind passed through the glade, carrying the scent of night flowers and old bark. Her wings shifted, trembling with something she wouldn't name. "Why don't you deal with humans, Aelira?" She closed her eyes. "Thornick, you've lived longer than me. You've seen more ages pass than the rings on Barkless Loan. And yet, you've never had someone walk into your glade and ask for something with eyes that burn. Not with greed, not with power. Just hope." Her voice shook. She steadied it. "He didn't want to conquer. He didn't want to bind me to a name or a ring or a shrine. He just wanted his mother to live. And he gave me what I asked for in return." Thornick leaned in, voice gentle. "What did you ask for?" Aelira looked down at her hands, then past them, at the grass her daughter once flattened in laughter, at the trees her daughter named and talked to even though they never answered. His firstborn. She whispered. Thorn Ik blinked, stunned. It was supposed to be symbolic. "I'd take a lock of hair, a whisper of potential, something ephemeral." But he misunderstood. Thornick's voice softened further. "And that misunderstanding grew into a child?" Aelira nodded once. He waited. Then, quietly, she said, "And I've never been the same." Night she met the human. The stars had hidden behind clouds, and even the forest had held its breath. Aelira stood at the edge of the weeping roots, a sacred place where no being dared linger unless called. The water there moved against gravity, climbing bark, drifting into the air like mist made of memory. Only the desperate ever found it. And he was desperate. He stumbled into the clearing, soaked in blood and rain, holding something wrapped in torn cloth. Not a weapon, not gold, not a trap. It was his mother. Pale, gasping, her life fading like the light behind his eyes. He knelt in the mud and whispered, "Please." Aelira watched from the trees, her form barely lit by the pulsing glow of moon spores. that floated down like gentle sparks. Humans had come to her glade before, with greed, with axes, with silver promises they never meant to keep. This one had nothing. She stepped into view, expecting him to flinch, to bow, to beg properly. Instead, he met her gaze, not with awe, not with fear, just hope, raw, aching, painful to look at. "What are you willing to give?" she asked, her voice smooth and sharp like wind through crystal leaves. "Anything," he said without pause. Aelira frowned. "They always said that. They never meant it. I want your firstborn," she said. His face didn't change. "Done." "You don't want to know what I'll do with it?" "No. You don't want to haggle? Offer me your name or a part of your soul or some vow bound in blood." He shook his head. "Take all of it if you have to. Just don't let her die." His mother coughed beside him, her breath shallow and wet. The roots beneath her began to glow as the forest responded to the nearness of aelira's power. "Lay her by the roots, gently," he did. She knelt beside the old woman, placing 2 fingers on her forehead, another 2 on her heart. Ancient syllables poured from her mouth like syrup, sticky with power. The roots pulsed. Light spiraled up her arms, into her chest, then into the woman. The breath returned. The shaking stopped. Life settled in her bones like sunlight in winter soil. Aelira stood, silent. The boy exhaled. He looked at his mother, kissed her forehead, then turned to Aelira and asked, "When do we start?" She blinked. "Start what?" He tilted his head. "Making the firstborn." Aelira stared at him, completely unprepared. He wasn't joking. I just healed your mother. You should be running, or maybe thanking me. But that?" He scratched the back of his neck. "You said you wanted my firstborn. I don't have one, so I figured we'd need to, fix that." Aelira was a being of instinct and wisdom, and wild elemental magic. She tangled with gods, torn through spirits, danced with time, and yet she had no idea what to say to that. "You're serious," she said. He nodded. "You saved her. That means I owe you." "And I always keep my word." She squinted at him. "Do you even know what you're doing?" He shrugged. "Not really, but you're glowing, so I trust you." Aelira narrowed her eyes. "You're strange," he smiled. "So are you." And against every voice in her head screaming not to every instinct that warned her, she was stepping into something too human, too warm, too irreversible. She said, 3 minutes. He looked confused. "You'll get 3 minutes, nothing more." His smile softened. "I won't need more." She rolled her eyes and pulled him toward the roots. Later, in the quiet after, while he slept curled near his mother, Aelira sat alone. Beneath the glowing bark, she pressed a hand to her stomach. Already, something shifted. The forest didn't sing that night. It watched. And so did the stars. The 3rd night after their deal, the stars returned, but they did not blink. They stared. Aelira didn't sleep. Spirits like her didn't need rest, but now her limbs ached in strange places. Her breath slowed, and her skin tingled like there was something crawling underneath. The forest felt different. Not hostile, not afraid, but aware. Like it was waiting to see what would become of her. The human was gone by morning. He left without fanfare, without a second demand, without even asking her name. Just a folded piece of cloth, torn from his own shirt, left draped over a mossy rock near where his mother had slept. Aelira didn't touch it. She simply stared at it for hours. And then the sickness came. Not a normal sickness, not something with fevers or sores, but a slow twisting from the inside out. It began with the scent of flowers. Too sweet, overwhelming. Her wings stiffened at odd angles. Her skin shimmered in shifting hues she couldn't control. Her voice cracked when she tried to sing to the morning trees. By the 6th dawn, She vomited glowing liquid that smelled of lilac and lightning. "What in the barkless abyss?" she muttered, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. Thornick found her curled up in a mushroom thicket later that day, trembling beneath her wings, clutching her stomach. "You look terrible," he offered cheerfully. "I feel like I swallowed the sun and it's trying to claw its way out." He sat beside her and tilted his head. "Pregnancy looks good on you," she growled. "It wasn't supposed to take. You're a spirit of life and root. You of all beings should know that life doesn't ask permission." Aelira groaned and leaned against a stone. He was supposed to forget. They always forget. He was supposed to take the healing and leave behind some echo of himself. Not this. Thornick paused, then asked, "You mean a child?" Aelira didn't answer. She was too busy dry heaving sparkles into the moss. The forest began to respond. Birds stopped singing. Vines curled inward. The glade quieted, not out of respect, but confusion. What was she becoming? Aelira tried to keep it secret. For weeks she hid beneath canopies, drinking sap and lying to curious vines, but the signs became too obvious. Glowing veins across her skin, wild surges of energy, dreams she didn't recognize. And then came the first mood shift one morning. She laughed at a dancing wisp. By mid-afternoon, she screamed at a passing deer. By nightfall, she sobbed into a patch of clover for 3 hours straight because it reminded her of the human's eyes. The forest whispered behind her. Back. Spirits murmured in bark and breeze. What has she done? She made a deal with a mortal. She's weakening. She's becoming one of them. She broke the oldest rule. Aelira didn't argue, because deep inside she wasn't sure they were wrong. The next full moon, her body collapsed near the shallow roots of an ancient oak. The pain surged through her in waves, not magical but primal. Heavy, raw. And for the first time in her centuries of life, she screamed, not in ritual, not in battle, not in power. Just pain. The moon turned red that night. Thornick found her. Again, but this time he didn't joke. He brought silence and something else. A blanket made of feathergrass and moss, stitched with glowing vine thread. He laid it over her as she writhed. "You will not be alone," he said. "Not tonight," Aelira gritted her teeth. "I should have never touched him," Thornick whispered. "Then why do you keep calling for him in your sleep?" She said nothing, but her fingers dug into the earth, and the roots began to glow. Something ancient was waking inside her. Not human. Not fi. Something else. The first contraction came with the breaking of dawn. Violent and unannounced. Aelira dropped to her knees on the black moss floor of the stone hollow, her hands sinking into the ground as if the forest itself might anchor her through it. But the earth, once obedient to her will, shivered beneath her like it too had lost all sense of control. Above, the canopy was silent. None of the trees whispered to her. None of the birds sang. Even the sky seemed to hold its breath, her wings convulsed. Behind her, useless now, trembling with every wave of agony that surged through her spine and into her core. She had endured centuries of battle. She had stood against wildfire spirits and cursed lakes. But nothing had prepared her for this. It wasn't just the pain. It was the sensation of something foreign moving inside her. Something that didn't belong to the forest. Something that wasn't entirely her. She screamed, and the roots around her flinched. She staggered through the grove, leaving glowing footprints behind. They burned white, not green. Human light, unnatural. Pure. She needed help. But not from the living. She needed barkless alone. She fell twice before she reached the path narrow, spiraling, carved through the oldest part of Sylvie, where even spirits didn't go unless summoned. Barkless alone sat at its end, a trunk so wide its shadow formed a dome over the valley, its bark stripped, its body scarred by time. It was older than the forest, older than memory. No mouth, no eyes, no voice. But it listened. Aelira dragged herself across the final stretch, her limbs shaking, her breath ragged. The air around her pulsed with ancient pressure. The barkless tree loomed above, unmoved, watching without watching. She collapsed at its roots, her voice cracking as she whispered, "Please." No response. No shift in wind. No song in leaves. Aelira pressed her forehead to its base. I didn't plan this. I didn't want this. The tree remained still, but she's coming. And I am not ready. I don't even know what she is. A warm glow began to rise from beneath her palms. Not from the tree, but from inside her. Her belly shimmered with soft violet light. The roots of barkless lone Quivered. Aelira gritted her teeth, her back arching with another wave of pain. She screamed again, but this time she didn't stop. Her voice rose and rose, no longer a cry for help, but a cry of life, raw, primal. UNTANED. Then something answered. Not a voice. Not words, but presence. The roots shifted, not to cradle her, but to ground her. Vines wrapped around her thighs, stabilizing her. Moss thickened beneath her, soft and warm like the lap of a mother she never knew. The air thickened with ancient memory, as if the forest was trying to remember how to birth. Aelira felt the child move inside her, not twist, not struggle, but push. Her scream shattered into panting gasps. The process was long, unending, each breath a war, each second a trial. At one point, she blacked out. When she woke, her body was still trembling, but the air had changed. She opened her eyes. A tiny hand, pale as moonlight, curled against her chest. Fingers, 5 of them. Human fingers. But on the fade child's forehead, a faint shimmer of living moss, glowing in rhythm with her breath. Aelira couldn't speak. Her heart thudded like thunder trapped in her throat. The child's eyes opened, not brown, not green. Something in between, alive, ancient, and utterly new. Aelira stared at her daughter, and for the first time in her life, she felt fear, not of danger, not of death, but of how much she would now have to lose. The forest stayed quiet. Bark less. Lone pulsed once, then fell still again. Aelira held the child close and whispered, "Luma." The name echoed through the roots, through the stone, through the trees. It didn't belong to the forest. It belonged to her. The name spread like fire through frost. Luma. Aelira hadn't meant to say it aloud. It had slipped out like a secret that had been waiting behind her teeth since the moment the human touched her hand. And now that it was spoken, the name took root. It echoed through the mycelium veins of Sylvie, slipped beneath the bark of every tree, shimmered across the surface of still ponds, and sank into the dreams of creatures too ancient to stir. Luma. A name not of the old tongue, nor the sacred grove. Not carved from ritual, not forged in pact. It was hers. The child blinked slowly. Her breath came in short, curious puffs. She didn't cry. She didn't wail. She simply stared up at her mother with wide, watching eyes, as if seeing not just a face, but a world unfolding. Aelira waited for something, anything to feel familiar. But motherhood, as it turned out, was not something the forest taught. The first days were chaos. The child's hunger knew no rhythm. Her sleep defied the moon's pull. And worst of all, her laugh when it came set off chain reactions in the roots below that made fruit rot. Flowers bloom in reverse, and river fish leap onto land as if possessed by joy. By the 3rd week, the elder spirits called a gathering. Aelira stood before them, Luma asleep in a sling of glowing vine across her chest. The elders bent willows, horned fungi, whispering stones watched in a silence too thick to be peaceful. "She is a hybrid," hissed the frostroot speaker. "She disrupts balance." Her presence unravels the ley lines, said another. She walks with no tether, croaked the cracked pine. Aelira stood tall. She walks because she was born. She is no weapon. She is no curse. She is mine. Thornick stepped forward. What is born of the forest and the flame does not belong to either, but to itself. Murmurs broke out. Some nodded. Others turned away in revulsion. Aelira locked eyes with the frostroot. I made a deal, and this is the price. But I do not regret it. The frostroot spirit's limbs trembled. Then you will raise her away from the heart, away from the glades. The seed must not take root in the sacred core. And so, aelira left. She built a hollow far from the paths where spirits walked, in a sun-dappled grove where the trees bent a little differently, as if unsure how to grow near her. The glade learned to hold its breath again, day after day, as mother and child learned the rhythm of a new song. Luma grew fast, too fast. By her first full moon, she could climb trees higher than a whisperbird's nest. By her second, she was talking. Not in Phi tongue, not in songroot glyphs, just talking. Words that didn't belong here. Words like why and mine and hug. When she turned 3 moons, she named a beetle Jeff. Jeff became the unofficial guardian of the moss yard. Aelira didn't know how to stop her, and part of her didn't want to, but the real change came not from Luma but from the forest. One night, Aelira found her daughter curled up beside a dying blossom drake, a creature feared for its venomous breath and acidic scales. Its chest was heaving, its eyes dim. Luma had wrapped it in leaves, humming something tuneless but sincere. When she noticed her mother, she whispered, "It was scared." So I stayed. The blossom drake lived. After that, the forest began to shift, not out of fear, not out of surrender, but curiosity. Plants began to bend toward Luma when she passed. Stones warmed beneath her feet. Nightbirds followed her steps in. Silence. Aelira watched it all with a heart pulled in 3 directions: pride, dread, and a love so large it terrified her. She began waking in the middle of the night, unsure if the ache in her chest was ancient warning, or the simple fear of any mother, that something so wonderful could disappear. And yet one thought repeated like a heartbeat, louder each time: she was never supposed to exist, but now that she did, Aelira couldn't imagine the world without her. The day Luma outran the wind, the forest finally stopped pretending it didn't see her. It happened near the river bend, where the old bark bridges spanned the root-choked streams. Aelira had warned her not to go that far alone. The vines could tangle, the water could snatch, and the duskglow foxes were territorial during shedding season. But warnings to a 16-moon child held the weight of a sigh in a storm. Luma ran anyway, barefoot, wild-haired, her laughter flinging sparks into the air with every step. The river tried to catch her with mist fingers and cold air. The vines rose in lazy coils to slow her, as they had done to wanderers for centuries. But she danced past them, a blur of green and warmth and something the forest couldn't name. Aelira arrived too late. Panting, furious, terrified. She found Luma on the far side of the bank, sitting cross-legged, braiding moss into a crown, soaked and smiling. "You disobeyed me," Aelira said through clenched teeth. Luma looked up. "You always say the forest is alive." "It is." "Then maybe it wanted me to see it from here." Aelira didn't answer. Her hands were shaking. Luma stood slowly, crown now crooked on her head. "You're afraid of what I am. But you made me, didn't you?" It wasn't said with malice. It was said with a child's clarity, the kind that cuts deeper than any weapon. That night, Luma didn't return to their hollow. She slept beneath the ancient fangroot tree, where the wind curled protectively around her. Aelira watched from a distance, hidden behind a veil of woven light, her fingers twisted around a sprig of forget-me-hollow flowers. Her daughter had become a storm she could no longer hold in her hands, but the forest The forest had begun to listen to her, not out of obligation, not out of ritual, out of respect. First among the moss wisps, then the birds, then the rock thoughts deep beneath the soil. The half-blood girl who did not command the forest, she cared for it. She did not demand tribute. She cleaned the wounds of bark-split trunks and cried over flattened nests. In time, even the elders came to see. The frostroot returned first. Not with threats, not with decrees, only questions. She does not bloom the way we do, it whispered. Aelira answered. She blooms in her own way. She cannot speak with the trees, but she listens better than any of us. She is not of our pattern. Neither was I, not anymore. Thornick arrived last, carrying a bundle of mushrooms that sang lullabies when roasted. He found Luma humming to a dying fern, coaxing its spores to fall gently. He sat beside her, silent for a long while. Then he said, "Your mother once made a terrible mistake." Luma smiled, not looking up. "I know," he blinked. "How?" "Because she tells me not to make the same one. Every time she looks at me." Thornick's breath puffed out in a chuckle. "And do you think you were the mistake?" She turned to him, her eyes catching a glimmer of moonlight. "No, but I think she's scared to admit I might be her best choice." Back in the hollow, Aelira sat alone. She traced the edge of the cloth the human boy had left behind 16 years ago. Time had faded its scent, but not its presence. She clutched it against her chest, eyes closed. Listening to the trees outside, they weren't whispering judgment anymore. They were whispering something else. Something almost like forgiveness. Aelira rose and stepped out into the clearing. Luma stood there, back turned, crown of moss still on her head, now glowing softly. "I'm not leaving," the girl said before Aelira could speak. "I know. But I'll need to one day," Aelira's voice cracked. "I know. I want to see the world beyond the roots. Meet others, humans, those who don't belong." A pause. "Like me." Aelira stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her daughter from behind. "Then I'll wait for you. No matter how long, the forest will too." Luma leaned back into the embrace. "And when I come back," Aelira smiled against her hair, "you'll come back with stories I can't even imagine." And the forest, for the first time in a generation, sang them both to sleep. The sun had not yet risen, but the light was already different. Aelira felt it before she saw it, an energy in the roots, a hum in the air, a tremble in the branches. Something was coming, or perhaps something was ending. Either way, the forest was restless. She stepped outside their hollow to find Thornick waiting beneath a sunspick tree. His cap slightly wilted, his spores dim. "She's gone," he said softly. Aelira froze. "Packed her things before dawn. Left through the West Grove. Didn't say goodbye." Aelira didn't speak. She didn't need to. Thornick continued. "She left a note. Not words, just a braid of moss and river pearl. Placed it in the nest of the nightjay she used to feed." Aelira stared past him, into the horizon that swallowed her daughter whole. For 16 years she had braced for this moment. She told herself she would be strong, that she would smile, that she would be proud, but all she could feel was empty. The forest offered no comfort. The glades were quiet. The roots, cold. Aelira wandered for hours, retracing Luma's favorite paths. The spot by the cliff where she used to lie on her back and name shapes in the sky. The hollow stump where she fed broken-winged beetles. The rock by the stream where she sang with no melody, just pure feeling. Memories lived in each place. Louder than birdsong, heavier than stone. As night fell, Aelira found herself back at the base of barkless Lone. The ancient tree stood as always unmoving, unfeeling, vast. Aelira dropped to her knees. "I gave up everything to protect her," she whispered. The wind did not respond. "I was cast out, stripped of my rights, exiled from the high canopy. And I did it without regret. A leaf floated past her cheek, landing on the roots beside her, but now she's gone. And there's nothing left to protect. The forest stirred. Slightly a voice, not from barkless loam, not from the trees, but from memory, echoed behind her. When do we start? Aelira turned. The clearing was empty, but her heart raced. Not from fear, but recognition. She remembered the human's face. Young, tired. Brave in the way only those who had nothing left to lose could be. She had never even asked his name, and he had kept his word. So had she. And now, so would luma. Aelira stood. As she did. Something shifted inside her. Not pain. Not grief. Legacy. She raised her hand, fingers glowing faintly, and pressed it against the bark of barkless loam. She's part of you now, she said, and I am not alone. And then slowly the bark pulsed back. 10 years later, a young traveler arrived in the forest, tired, limping, his leg wrapped in cloth. He carried no weapon, only a journal made of bark leather and a piece of faded cloth tied around his wrist. He had heard stories of a forest where spirits walked like wind and healed the wounded, where a girl once tamed a venom beast with nothing but kindness, where magic bent not to blood or power but to care. He fell asleep near the weeping roots. When he awoke, there was a girl crouching beside him. Young, not quite human. Her eyes glowed faintly green. She handed him a cup of steaming moss broth and said, "You'll be fine. Just don't lie, and never steal, and never offer your firstborn unless you really mean it." He blinked. "Who are you?" She grinned, tossing a moss crown onto his chest. "I'm Luma." He blinked again. "Are you a spirit?" "Nah, I'm just her daughter." He looked around the forest. "Whose?" From deep within the glade, a voice answered. "Mine." Aelira stepped into the clearing. Her wings older now, her eyes wiser, her smile no longer sharp, but soft. She looked at the boy. Then at her daughter. Then at the forest. And for the first time in a century, she said it aloud, without fear, without shame, without bitterness. "We don't deal with humans." A pause. "But sometimes we raise them."